why would ActBlue have no mechanism for tracking these things? And just the simple act of asking it provides the answer. Clearly, the answer is they don't want it to be tracked. Right? And if you ask, well, why wouldn't they want it to be tracked? The only thing that you could assume is they're breaking the law. The thought that I had of if USAID is really starting to stop the flow of cash to these, for lack of a better term, deep state operations, which is, the propaganda getting shoved down our throat, which is the funding that a lot of these, presumably the funding that a lot of these, particularly Democratic candidates get. And I'm guessing, I haven't seen something yet, but I'm guessing part of the election, in quotes, fortification system funding is coming through this as well. And if it gets blocked even temporarily, how much momentum are they going to lose, particularly, say, in the next midterm? So, and then as I was talking about that, Nima was like, hey, I just read an article on something relevant to this, and this is the article. So this is the Harris ActBlue refund mystery by @Amuse, as Nima just said, and this is amuseonx.substack.com. So I'll dive into this again, which apparently is the first time for everybody listening. Buyer's remorse or something more sinister? That's the question hanging in the air as we examine the peculiar and stunning pattern of refunds issued by the Harris campaign. In contrast to the Trump campaign, which issued a mere 31 refunds, the Harris campaign processed an astonishing 10,821 refunds. These contributions were all handled through the Democrats' preferred fundraising platform, ActBlue, which has a glaring lack of Know Your Customer protocols. The absence of any real verification raises serious concerns. Were these donations genuine, manipulated, or something even more troubling? Probably all of the above. Consider the curious case of Lane McWilliams, who tops the chart with an astounding 101 refunds. Lane, a California resident, engaged in a peculiar cycle of giving and requesting money back, often on the same day. On November 30th, 2023, Lane received multiple refunds, a pattern that continued into early 2024, culminating in the final set of refunds on February 25th, 2024. What could explain this behavior? Is it an indecisive donor, or is it something more calculated? Lane isn't alone. Diane Gregory from Texas had 91 refunds, and Donald Madison from Washington had 85 refunds. Also demonstrated similar patterns. Something here doesn't add up. So this is the first time I've heard about this. I'm glad Nima pulled this article up. And this is really weird. Why would somebody continuously make a donation and then ask for a refund, make a donation and ask for a refund, and why are we only seeing it on one side of the political aisle? In total, about $5.2 million was refunded by the Harris campaign, with an average refund of approximately $483. The largest single refund, $21,700. Compare that with the smallest positive refund of $1. The scale and range of these transactions are both impressive and unsettling. Refunds span from $1 to tens of thousands of dollars, yet the system facilitating these transactions lacks any robust donor identity checks. ActBlue, unlike other platforms, has no mechanism for verifying the legitimacy of donations, meaning anyone with a prepaid debit card can make a contribution using whatever name, address, or employer that they choose. Now, before I froze, actually, no, I'm going to keep reading before I bring that back up. With over 5,478 unique individuals receiving refunds and some receiving massive amounts, one must wonder why so many people supposedly had a change of heart, if that's even what happened. No one, least of all ActBlue, can definitively say whether these donations came from actual American citizens or were funneled through foreign entities or wealthy domestic players breaking finance campaign limits. So this is just a perfect example of looking at things systematically, right? So this guy's making the point that ActBlue is the only facilitator of campaign finance, which I don't know if that's true or not, but the only facilitator of campaign finance that doesn't have any way of really tracking where the money comes from. And this is obviously a systematic issue where the law isn't properly requiring them to do so. And now, I believe, would be an opportune moment to say, if we've got the Republican majority who theoretically is against this sort of stuff. I know, in private they might not be, but often this is a great opportunity to say, look, we have the people here. Here's the policy to fix this. They can't be seen saying no. And, we're all excited. I'm going to minimize this for a second. Oh, come on, computer. There we go. We're all excited about the flurry of executive orders that have been coming in from the Trump administration. And it's important to remember that all executive orders are a flash in the pan. If they're not followed up by actual policy from the legislative branch, they could be flashed in the pan out, just like we saw during the Biden administration, where the first thing he did was undo a ton of the executive orders that Trump did. And when Trump got into office, the first thing he did was undo like 78 or 72 orders that the Biden administration did. That's not real policy. It's not real policy. The executive branch still has to work within the framework that the Constitution and the legislative branch gives it. Now, the legislative branch has given too much power to the executive branch, but they still have to operate in that framework. And so it's really, really important that I think this is an excellent opportunity to say we have the momentum. This is something that could be fixed now if it was the proper lawmakers at the federal level were approached. So I'll keep reading. This is not an isolated issue or an anomaly. It's a systematic pattern that raises serious questions about the integrity of campaign financing. When comparing refunds state by state, California unsurprisingly takes the lead with 2,261 refunds, followed by New York, 837, and Texas, 752. The widespread nature of these refunds, both geographically and numerically, demands answers. In an era where we can track even the most mundane transactions, how is it ActBlue is allowed to operate as if it's the Wild West of campaign finance? And I mean, this is just such an amazing point that particularly since 2001, September 11th, 2001, we have probes up every fucking orifice. Well, my phone right now is listening to what I'm saying, so it can continuously create this profile for me to offer me ads of what I'd like to buy. Facebook, not that I use Facebook anymore, is still selling all its data to anybody who wants to buy it. And every person has every single frickin' transaction of everything that they do tracked. But for some reason, ActBlue can't figure out where this money's coming from. Or, is clearly intentionally not worrying about where the money is coming from in this world where it's so easy to track everything. He goes on, the need for reform in ActBlue's practices is urgent to prevent what seems to be an open invitation for fraud. To which I said before we froze, I don't think this is where ActBlue needs to be reformed. I think this is where the law needs to be reformed. So an organization like ActBlue can never arise again. The potential ramifications are serious. There are currently no specific laws requiring Know Your Customer protocols for political fundraising platforms like ActBlue. I mean, there's a systematic problem right there. Where, hey, we have laws saying that there's a maximum contribution limit of like $2,600 or whatever it is, and you need to show that or that you have to require that the person gives information. But I'm sure the law doesn't say anything to the effect of you need to make sure that that information that they give you is accurate. Right? This absence presents a glaring loophole, exactly, that undermines the credibility of campaign finance regulations. Of course, it's what I was just saying. Without a mandatory Know Your Customer system, the system can easily be exploited by wealthy donors. Yes. The need for regulation to impose Know Your Customer standards on platforms like ActBlue. He's kind of repeating the same thing.
Not necessarily wealthy donors, but state actors, more importantly, such as, let's say, USAID, maybe?
USAID, yes. And then this is from November 11th, 2024. This is before the whole lid got cracked off of USAID when he wrote this. This isn't simply partisan conjecture. The sheer volume of data tells a different story. The Trump campaign, in stark contrast, issued only 31 refunds, while the Harris campaign, same number as before, issued about 10,000 refunds. To put this into perspective, Harris processed about 34,800% more refunds than Trump. Are we to believe that Harris supporters had buyer's remorse at such an astronomical rate, or is something sinister at play? Well, I mean, I'd like to make a joke that they had buyer's remorse, but someone who continuously makes donations and then keeps requesting them back, and not just one crazy person. There appears to be a bunch of these people. Obviously, there's something else going on. In dollar terms, the disparity is equally striking. The Harris campaign refunded a total of $5 million, whereas the Trump campaign refunded about $74,000. Moreover, when considering the total amounts raised, $1 billion for Harris versus $400 million for Trump, the Harris campaign still refunded a significantly higher proportion of contributions, approximately 0.5% for Harris, to about 0.019% for Trump. The contrast couldn't be more stark. While no one is directly accusing the Harris campaign of fraud, well, I mean, I might, the questions beg asking. Who are the contributors? Why so many refunds? And why does ActBlue, a platform that processes millions in political donations, have no mechanism for ensuring the legitimacy of those donations? Well, I mean, this is an example where asking the question provides the answer. I mean, let's get real here, right? Let me put this down again. He's saying that why would ActBlue have no mechanism for tracking these things? And just the simple act of asking it provides the answer. Clearly, the answer is they don't want it to be tracked, right? And if you ask, well, why wouldn't they want it to be tracked? The only thing that you could assume is they're breaking the law. I mean, this goes back to, like, Animo, what you were saying, that, oh, hey, there is no evidence that we're breaking the law. There is no evidence that we're breaking the law. There is no evidence of breaking the law. That's because you have a systematic method of making sure no evidence is ever collected.
Plausible deniability.
Right? And then in other realms of reality, let's take the court system, for example. If you have evidence, and that evidence has to have a chain of custody, meaning there's a knife or a glove or gun or whatever, right? Once that thing has taken into evidence, there has to be a written, documented account of where that evidence was at any given time for the purpose of ensuring that the evidence isn't tampered with. And in court, if there isn't a chain of custody in evidence, for the gun, for example, the evidence gets thrown out because tampering must be assumed. Well, there's no evidence that it got tampered with. It doesn't matter because you lost the chain of custody. We have to assume the opportunity was there for it to get tampered with, so we have to assume that it was. That's how other realms where the political stakes aren't so high operate when things need to make sense. But when political stakes are high and the amount of money to be stolen is high, they come up with this thing of like, well, there's no evidence that it didn't happen. It's not our fault that we didn't actually track anything, right? It's just so asinine. It's so asinine. And I'm making the argument here that when things are this dumb, that simply asking the question provides the answer. I'll keep reading. The Federal Election Commission's rules are supposed to prevent improper influence, but when campaigns rely on a platform with zero accountability, those rules become meaningless and easily circumvented. Exactly. Clearly, that's the point here, is that there's this leviathan of rules designed to achieve a certain purpose, but if you put one gap in it, you put one loophole in it, the whole thing becomes meaningless. We got
a comment from Colonel Foley. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the CIA delegated almost all of its foreign soft power to NGOs because it wasn't traceable, and you could experiment a lot more without state barriers. Exactly. That's the new system. That's globalism, basically. That's what Carol Quigley called the potential future pluralist economy, where you have, some kind of octopus or spider web of NGOs that is being hopefully taken down right now. I think that the freak out that we're seeing right now is because the new U.S. administration is onto something. It's because Elon Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency are onto something. And because they're examining it at the level where it has to be examined and stopped, that's why people are freaking out. USAID, white helmets, UN, etc., became the soft power for the financial arm. Yeah, for the financial arm, IMF and World Bank. Right, you have these institutions, these organizations that use the symbology and the language of government. Right, you have the blue helmets, the United Nations, in and of itself, by the way, a private organization funded by Bill Gates and a few other billionaires, and they are just sort of imposed on us as if we're supposed to accept them as authority. It's never really questions, never really my choice. It's just that, look, they have symbology, and they have emblems and
They have
seals.
credibility. They have titles. Yeah.
It's more it's a loose network of very wealthy institutions, lots of money accumulated in institutions. And where did all this money come from? Not because they're geniuses, but as we're seeing now, because it's just shoveled in their direction by entities like USAID, which, by the way, Marco Rubio is in charge of that. I believe the State Department is technically in charge of USAID. He said that before all this began, right, before they started just going in there and cutting it all off, medical NGOs for sure. He said that they were not interested in any cooperation or any audits or any dialogue or any questions being answered. They were acting like they weren't even part of the government. I heard this on Sam Tripoli's podcast recently, that in turn they heard Marco Rubio explain that these people were acting like they're not part of the government. And this goes to there's so many of these semi-government institutions or committees. I believe the SEC is technically something like that, and the CDC. All these agencies that are doing policy on behalf of entities such as the United Nations. Relationships occur behind the scenes, but they don't necessarily take orders from the federal government, but for the most part, because they haven't had to for the past decades, because nobody cared to try. Now this government has identified this problem, and they're doing something, and so they're freaking out. And by the way, also, I just forwarded you, Dylan, another article from Amuse on X that came out today, where he talks about how there's I think this is actually a good sign.
Where did you forward it? I don't see it.
I think it was to you. Some of these actions, like putting a freeze on USAID, have temporarily been supposedly stopped, at least on paper, by a judge, right? I think the Trump admin is saying we don't give a shit. We're not obligated to spend this money. This is executive privilege. Executive falls under executive authority. But the judge used the argument that the workers that are laid off may experience hardships, even though they're on paid leave, right? They may experience hardships. That's not a thing. That's a private sector civil matter usually. But I'm thinking it's actually a good sign that the people fighting back have such weak arguments. They're not saying it's not under the president's or the executive branch's authority. They're actually saying that it's because the workers are facing hardships. The workers who are wasting your money are facing hardships, and so they need to be put back in.
Won't anybody think about the corrupt bureaucrats and their families? Right. Yeah.
It's the weakest possible argument. It's like the federal government has the authority to spend or not spend, to establish departments or not establish departments, unless it violates congressional law or the Constitution. And here's now the argument that these workers are facing hardships. Absolutely ridiculous.
Everyone, please like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow this channel. I think we cover a lot of good stuff. We're covering ideas that you're not hearing anywhere else. Economic ideas, historical ideas, systematic politics ideas you're not hearing anywhere else.